Back here with another review of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. This time we're talking Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 12, entitled The Siege, featuring none other than myself and the Doc Chris Mueller. Today we're breaking down the latest episode of the show and another very good installment of what has been a very strong season so far. What did you say, Chris?
Yeah, I liked this episode. It was, just it was fun. There was some familiar characters, and we got a little bit of storyline development, but not like what I would call concrete answers to certain questions.
Yeah, which is good and which is what I kind of expected at this point in the season. With it only being episode 4, there's still plenty of time. I think there's 10 episodes as part of this season. There's still plenty of time for them to answer a lot of the questions that we've had up to this point, and even more questions. Like I had a lot of questions coming out of that last episode. We now have even more questions than we did coming out of episode 3, and it definitely is neck and neck with episode 3. I would say as one of the best episodes so far this season. But like you said, we saw some familiar faces. We got the return of Greef Karga, obviously played by Carl Weathers, who I believe directed this episode, which is pretty cool.
He did, yeah.
He did. So we had him back. We had Cara Dune, obviously played by Gina Carano. She was a great character in the first season. She was very good here as well. And even Mythrol, who was played by Horatio Sands, I believe his name is. And he was obviously in the first episode of the show way back when in season 1. So we had a lot of familiar faces here on this episode, and it kind of felt like an extension of the original movies. And obviously The Mandalorian has a lot of that same feel of the original trilogy. But even from like the speeder bike chase to the Grand Canyon chase kind of thing at the end there, it really felt like an extension of those original movies to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with the speeder bikes and what they did with those. I thought that was a really cool looking scene because we got to see like a couple of guys crash and then
Yep.
a couple of guys actually do well and make it all the way down the mountain, because you normally just see those things gliding across the ground, so it was kind of cool to see them used in a different way.
Yeah, no, I thought that was funny too. That was a great touch in that when they showed them going down the hill or the Rocky Mountain, whatever, two of the guys actually crashed, like you said, which was a very good touch because you're just automatically assuming that they're going to be fine. But I think it's more realistic that two of them will die. And, it's like in the original movies when we see them with the speeder bikes on Endor and they're kind of going through the trees and whatever. I mean, you're bound to crash into a tree at some point, and we never really saw that unless they were sabotaged by whoever. But we kind of saw that here, which was cool. That last great chase at the end was really good, and it felt like a much more lighthearted episode for the first, I don't know, I would say 2/3 of it. We didn't get a lot of Mando on this episode. This was really all about, Greef Karga and Cara Dune. It really felt like this was kind of more of their episode than it was Mando or even Baby Yoda.
Yeah, I mean they did a little bit of explaining about what's changed since Mando was there last, and we got to see just a little bit of what their roles are now and how they've changed. It looks like Reef is doing a little bit more than just handing out bounties. Kara's the marshal now. I actually thought Horatio Sands' character was going to turn on them at some point.
It seemed like that was the
Because,
direction they were going, and with how they were
well,
treating him and
Carl
whatever.
Weathers, right, he was being such a jerk to him.
Yeah, you would.
And I'm
Honestly, I
sitting
was
there
kind of
watching
hoping for
it
that to happen.
like you are giving this guy a reason to like alert them or whatever, but it never happened. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering if maybe they'll save that for down the line, or if that was just supposed to be humorous in some way, even though, I don't know, slavery's not that funny. Like, that guy's an indentured servant. I know he's a criminal, and this is basically an exchange for prison time, but yeah, I don't know.
I
It's
don't know.
kind of weird.
Yeah, it was a little weird. Like you're kind of just conditioned to expect that the criminal, having done, being a criminal and all, you're just kind of expecting, okay, if they're given the option to lessen their jail time, because they said he was in jail for like 350 years or something, but they were going to take like 150 years off if he helped them out with their plan for the mission and whatever. And kind of usually in these type of scenarios and shows and movies and whatever, that person either usually turns or does something like definitively good to kind of to determine that they're a babyface now in wrestling terms and whatever. But we never really got either of those things, which makes me think, like you said, Chris, that we might
I
get
felt
more
bad
with him to come.
when his speeder got destroyed. I felt kind of bad.
What, the guy when
It's
Cara
like,
Dune, when she pushed the ship up against the guy? Is that what you were talking about, or the beginning before that?
no, when she takes the troop transport and flies it off the little landing pad area and lands on that guy's little speeder
Oh,
thing.
right. Yeah. Was that his ship or his whatever?
He was driving it, and he seemed the most upset when it got crashed, so I assumed it was his.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say if he was a criminal, I'm not sure how it was. Maybe it was his previously or something, and they just held on to it. I don't know. But yeah, they just definitely, not at just one point, but like at several points, specifically Greef Karga treated him like a complete dick. He was just a total dick towards the guy, which made me feel definitely bad for him. But I thought he was a good character. I'm glad they brought him back from the Carbonite from episode 1 in season 1. So I thought he was a nice little touch to the episode. And there's just little things that he does throughout the episode that make it even better. Like, for example, I don't know at what point in the episode exactly, but there was a scene where they were shooting at some of the stormtroopers, and he started shooting at them even after they were already dead. Like, he was behind, I don't know exactly at what point of the episode, like I said, but he was behind a wall or something, and he was letting everyone else do the work. But when they were done, he kind of acted like he helped it out. He helped them out by shooting him, afterward, which was pretty funny. But yeah, I thought he was a great touch on this episode too. And it really, like I said, felt like it was a Greef Karga, Cara Dune episode. We found out at the end that she was actually from Alderaan, and everyone that she knew, family, friends, whatever, everyone's dead except for her. So I'm glad that we got a bit more character development with her as well.
Yeah, for sure. And they may have said that in the first season because they talked about her being a shock trooper a little bit.
Okay.
They might have mentioned that she was from Alderaan. I can't remember, but yeah, it's just nice to see these occasional characters brought back in. Like I hope we see Timothy Oliphant at some point again.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean the real meat of this episode was the last 5 minutes when we finally see Moff Gideon again, and we get the little message from the guy who was in the first season doing he wanted to do some experiments on Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
So I don't know for sure if this is what it is, but it looked like in those little cloning facility things that they had set up, it looked like those might be the initial clones that they were trying to make for Palpatine to create Snoke.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So when they first, you don't get a great glimpse of what they're exactly doing, and obviously that was done by design to kind of just give you a cliffhanger for the rest of the season. But if you look very closely, not that it's strongly one of the clones resembles Snoke, but it has kind of like the same head shape where the scar would be on his head. So again, I don't know if that was exactly Snoke, but it definitely looked like that's what they were going for. And I think the exact word, and again, you're more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am. Is it Midi-chlorian? Is that the word that they use for the cloning stuff?
Yeah, the Midi-chlorian thing really hasn't been acknowledged too much since the prequels because a lot of people were like, oh, well, the Force is supposed to be like this mystical thing. Now that's just these bacteria. Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
But, like, they explained it in some of the books, I guess. Like, they go into detail about how the Midi-chlorians are, like, what something called the Wills uses to like manipulate things. I don't really understand it completely because I never read most of those older novels that are no longer canon. But I think when they kept saying M count, they were referring to midichlorians, and they were referring to how high the babies were. And I think they were trying to like transfuse something from the baby into Snoke to make him a powerful Force user. That was my theory anyway.
No, that would make sense, and I'm glad it looks like that they're kind of bridging that gap, because that was never really explained, and for obvious reasons. I know the later movies, obviously the most recent trilogy, had all these different directors, and they went in a completely different direction. We could do a whole other episode or series of episodes on those movies alone, just how far they kind of strayed away from the original plan, it looked like, and how they kind of randomly brought back Palpatine, which was cool, but it was completely random in that last movie, and they tried to kind of catch you up to speed when they said, oh, they were trying to use Snoke to bring back Palpatine with the whole Midi-chlorian thing, whatever. But it looks like if this show is going to tell us how the First Order came to be and how Palpatine was kind of in the shadows the entire time, because that was never even alluded to in the first two movies, that being episode 7 and 8, I think The Mandalorian can kind of make up for some of the later criticisms that those movies had a couple of years later.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how much they incorporate from those new movies, because the new movies take place roughly 25 years after this show is happening, because the show is supposed to be about 5 years after the fall of the Empire at the
Okay.
end of Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a little while. And my hope is that they actually focus more on the Mandalorian culture, because in the show, in the Star Wars Rebels show, there's a storyline about how, like, the Mandalorians have sort of lost the planet of Mandalore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be cool to see them, like, try to retake the planet, and Mando learning more about the Mandalorian culture, and, like, Bo-Katan maybe helping him integrate into the greater Mandalorian society, just not the cult that he was in, which he didn't even really know he was in.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Until later on. So you're hoping that you want to see that later on in the season, or you're hoping that's what they kind of get to at some point?
Well, I think this season isn't going to broach that too much, but I think maybe, like, starting with the third season, I'd like to see them do something on the planet Mandalore with more of the Mandalorian people. Like, it needs to do something that doesn't just focus on any of the Jedi or Sith stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm kind of two minds on the thing, and I like where they're going, what happened, what went down in this episode, where they might be going with the remainder of the season. But I want a nice mix of, like, they acknowledge that the other movies exist, and obviously we're coming off the events of Episode 6, and they've acknowledged the fall of the Death Star and whatever. But I'm hoping that the show can also kind of bridge the gap between Episode 6 and 7, explain what was going on there, how the First Order kind of came to be, because they left a lot of things open-ended in the 7th, 8th, and 9th movies. But I also, at the same time, kind of like you mentioned, Chris, I don't want to see too much of the Jedi stuff dominate this show. I'd rather kind of have it be a nice mix of, like, okay, those movies existed, but we're also kind of building our own universe over here as well, and focus more on the Mandalorian stuff, as you mentioned. So yeah, with the third season already confirmed for 2021, I think that'd be a nice direction to go in. I don't know if Bo-Katan will be back this season, but hopefully next season. We did not get Ahsoka Tano on this episode, obviously, and I think she's coming up. And I thought that they acknowledged her at the end of the last episode, because that's where they were heading for this episode, but obviously not. Is it safe to say that we're getting her on episode 5 next week?
I don't know, man. I mean, they're very secretive with stuff, so for all we know, Ahsoka Tano is the last episode. Like, we really don't know anything, so I'm just kind of happy to be along for the ride. Like, so many shows get ruined by spoilers, or the writers will give out details and interviews, and the thing that Disney does so well with Marvel and Star Wars is they either put so much information out there that you don't know what's true, or they don't put any information out there, so you're genuinely surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with a TV show like this being, like, such a big production for Disney, the fact that they were able to keep so much of the details under wraps is pretty impressive.
Yeah, especially with the Baby Yoda stuff, too. I mean, we talked about it last week, how they did not even hint at there being a Baby Yoda until that first episode of the show aired over a year ago, and they sacrificed all the money that they would have made, and we all know that Disney likes to make their money off of the merchandise and whatever. They sacrificed all that Christmas money just to keep it a secret until the actual dolls came out in, like, April of this year, which is like a 5 or 6 month difference. But speaking of whom, is it safe to say that we kind of know what the reasoning is now as to why the Empire wants Baby Yoda to kind of take that Force aspect from him and use it for whatever cloning they might be doing?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption based on what we saw in this episode. I'm still not 100% sure. Like, I still think that this baby could either, considering it's 50 years old, could either be the baby of Yoda or, like, a clone of Yoda that somehow they were able to make when he wasn't paying attention. But there is another of Yoda's species that was in the prequels named Yaddle. It was a female.
Yeah, well, yeah, she was very briefly, I think, in only the first movie. I don't know if we saw her after that, right?
I think maybe just in the background of, like, the second movie or something, but it's like a very small, no lines kind of role. So it's possible maybe Yaddle will be brought back for this. Like, maybe Yaddle will be the mother or something. I don't know.
No, I think
there's a lot
of
things they could do, but, like, the fact that they've never even named Yoda's race, let alone shown the planet he's from or giving any information out there. It really gives this show a lot of freedom to kind of create that information on their own.
Yeah, no, I agree. It feels like they're definitely kind of creating stuff as they go along, and not in a bad way. Whereas, they're taking stuff from previous comics or movies or whatever, and some of that stuff is still canon, obviously, but it kind of feels like they're creating their own path, and they're doing a very good job of it. It feels like Dave Filoni, that's his name, right? And Jon Favreau?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dave Filoni. They're doing a great job so far of kind of paying tribute to each era of the Star Wars universe while creating their own identity for the show and not just merely being an extension of the movies, which I think is awesome. It's a great mix so far. So, and also the shows too. I mean, again, I haven't seen Rebels, I haven't seen Clone Wars, but the fact they're bringing back Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan in the show and Mandalorian, an actual, like in real life and action show, I think is awesome. And so far they're doing a great job of kind of giving every character an equal amount of screen time. Again, Mandalorian, or Mando specifically, wasn't a big part of this episode, so we kind of got to know a bit more about Cara Dune and everyone else as part of this episode too, which I thought was cool. Now, another question I had for you, Chris. We saw Boba Fett at the end of episode 1 of this season. We have not heard from him. We have not seen him. He has not been acknowledged since. Do you think he could tie into the whole cloning thing, being the son of Jango Fett from the whole, obviously the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones in Episode 2? Do you think he could tie into this whole thing?
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption to make just because we know that it's at least some of the same people from that cloning facility because of the patches that were on that guy's jacket are the same ones from the prequel movies. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, maybe at some point they'll be like, well, we need to find out information about these clones, and somebody will be like, oh, well, I know a guy who's a clone technically, and then they find Boba Fett or something. I mean, there's a lot of different things they could do to tie Boba Fett into this story. I sort of hope he's not an enemy. Like, I kind of want, because Boba Fett was just a bounty hunter. Mm-hmm. He didn't really, he never hated Han Solo or anything like that, so he could be redeemed because he wasn't really ever a bad guy. He was just like Han Solo was kind of a criminal. He was doing his job.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot they can do with Boba Fett, and I hope they don't just bring him in for one more quick cameo and then that's it. Like, if they're gonna tease him at the end of an episode like that, they gotta make it kind of meaty roll.
No, I think so. I don't know yet. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's going to be a separate story. I think it is safe to assume it's going to have to do with the cloning stuff, which I think is cool to kind of acknowledge his backstory and background and whatever. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be more than just a one-off cameo. I don't think he's going to be like a Bo-Katan where she may very well come back at some point this season. I don't think she will. I felt like that was a one-off. But I feel like Boba Fett, at the end of episode 1, you're not going to just drop a reveal like that and then have him come back at either the very end or right before the very end just to either help out Mando or fight Mando for one quick scene and have that be it. I think there's a bigger story there, and I think they'll get to it eventually. Another big reveal in the episode at the very, very end, in addition to the whole Midi-chlorian cloning thing with Snoke and whatever, which was a super cool visual, was when they showed Moff Gideon. And what he was wearing, it looked like he was wearing Darth Vader garb. And obviously it wasn't. It has since been confirmed that it was, you see all the Dark Troopers in the background. What was your reaction to seeing the Dark Troopers there along with Moff Gideon at the very end of the episode, Chris?
Well, what made me kind of wonder about that was they were all sort of lined up like they were robots or something.
Yes, yeah.
It sort of reminded me of the Borg in Star Trek, if you've ever seen that, when they're all just yeah, the Borg are sort of like a half cyborg type race, and you see these shots in their ship of them just all lined up in these little pods, and it reminded me of that a little bit. Someone was wondering, are those Dark Troopers that we've been seeing just mindless clones? Are they actually droids? What's going on? I have no idea, but it might have just been a cool visual. It might not mean anything that they were all up against the wall like that, but it was a very strange way to position them.
Yeah, the fact that it closed out the episode and the way they kind of zoomed out and they showed more and more and more with them on the wall was interesting. And again, I don't think they would close the episode on that unless it was something super significant. I kind of got that feeling as well, that it kind of was, it gave that aura as if they are robots and whatever, and maybe there's more to be explained with that. I'm sure there is. I wasn't really exactly sure what to think about it unless they are robots, but maybe they are, maybe they're not. I guess we'll find out soon enough. But some of the other smaller things I wanted to bring up too that I thought were really smart about this episode, right before that scene, or I mean, it was the same scene, but when they show the Imperial Star Destroyer that Moff Gideon was in, I'm like, where have I seen that scene before? When they show it from like the underside of the ship, obviously it's the first scene that you see in the first Star Wars movie, unless I'm mistaken. I'm like, oh, I thought that was a really cool inspiration for that scene. They kind of reused that here. They recycled that for the beginning of that scene at the very end. And then also during the speeder bike TIE fighter scene, when they were showing the perspective of the TIE fighter, I don't know if I've ever seen that before. Did they do that in the original movies where they would show the point of view of the Imperial guys in the TIE fighters, or no?
I can't remember. I mean, I know they did it in the X-Wing once or twice, but yeah, that might be something that we've seen before. It's kind of a small thing that didn't really stick out to me, but it did seem funny when, like, because when they showed that TIE fighter crash, like, it seemed like the pilot had a reaction, which makes me think it's not a droid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then again, droids in this universe have, like, feelings and emotions, so who knows? I mean, there's so many unanswered questions, and some of them may not even be important questions for all we know.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious to see, like, we don't really even know for sure if they want that material for Snoke. So, for all we know, because they were referring to a specific volunteer. That's what stuck out to me, was he was like, the it might not take with the volunteer, which means that it's not like multiple clones.
Mhm.
They're trying to do it to one person. Maybe it's the Emperor, but I don't know. I just don't want them to make too much of the story about characters from the movies. Like, if there's a
Yeah.
little bit about Snoke and the Emperor, fine. But yeah, I want this to be more about the non-Jedi side of the Star Wars universe. And so far, they've been keeping it that way, so I'm happy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm still wondering, and again, it's not a concern or a criticism or whatever, because I'm sure it's going to be explained. How do they still have so many Imperial, officers, stormtroopers, and people like that out there? There's a fucking Star Destroyer out there. How is that stuff still existing if the Death Star was destroyed 5 years ago? Like, it makes me wonder. I mean, obviously, we know the Emperor is still alive in some form or fashion. I feel like that almost has to be explained in the show. And I agree they shouldn't devote too much of the show to explaining stuff from the movies, but I feel like a nice mix is necessary because the First Order hasn't even been alluded yet. It hasn't even been discussed yet. And we were told, I believe, in The Rise of Skywalker, that the First Order had absolutely nothing to do with the Empire whatsoever in the re-rise of the Emperor. So I feel like that has to be explained at some point.
Well, they said that, like, the First Order rose from the remnants of the Empire, so it seems like there are people from the Empire who sort of probably just took control of what forces were left, which we have no idea really how big that was. I mean, there could have been billions of soldiers all over the galaxy that, still need something to do. So somebody probably just stepped in and took control. But they also made it kind of clear that some of the stormtroopers were, like, technically former stormtroopers who were still just wearing their armor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the first season, there was some who, like, their armor was all dirty and beat up because they're not part of the Empire anymore. It's just what they have.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I don't know. It seems like obviously Moff Gideon still has power in some way, and maybe he's, like, part of the First Order, but it's very strange. And
Yeah. I just want to know about that transition. That's all.
yeah, I mean, it's weird because we're talking about, like, the political dealings of an entire galaxy instead
Yeah.
of just a country or their planet. So yeah, they need to do a little explaining on that, but at the same time, I don't know how much explanation is really needed for this show.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. At some point, I'm hoping it will be explained, and I have enough faith in the show from what I've seen so far that they either will get to it eventually, or someone else, whether it not be Mandalorian related or not, will get to it in another piece of Star Wars programming, so to speak. Whether it be another show or a prequel or something. I don't know, because I don't know if we have any more movies coming out. Right? Did they announce anything else? Because I know the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie was made into a show for Disney Plus with Ewan McGregor. Do they have any other movies that are confirmed to come out at any point?
I want to say that they did give like one filmmaker a movie last year or something, but I haven't heard anything else about it. It might have been Colin Trevorrow, who did part of the screenplay for Episode 9.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, you're saying he might have a project, but it hasn't been named yet. He just was kind of given the reins to do a certain Star Wars project, you're saying?
Yeah. So, and there's also rumors of something involving what's called the Knights of the Old Republic era, which is like thousands of years before what we've seen in the movies.
Okay.
So it's sort of like when the Jedi Empire was first building itself and it was big and there wasn't really the rule of two for the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
So there's video games and novels and all sorts of stuff that take place in that era, but none of it's canon to the movies, so they may just start fresh.
I was going to say, I remember that video game. It was wasn't it called Knights of the Old Republic or something, but it was from like 10, 15 years ago or whatever. It was from a long time ago.
Yeah, and it was a super popular game, so that's why a lot of people would like to see some of those characters brought in some way, but, you know, considering it's supposed to be thousands of years difference in the timeline, they can sort of do it whenever.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I thought at some point, not that I really care to see it because I didn't care about the first one, I thought they may have hinted at a Solo 2 movie, kind of after how they left off with the first one. I didn't really like that movie a lot at all, so maybe they will make one. I'm not exactly sure. What'd you say?
I doubt it. Solo really didn't make any money for Disney, as far as I know. Like, it did okay in terms of numbers, but because it cost so much to make, it was kind of a wash, and the reviews for it really weren't good. So if they did anything, I would imagine it would be probably one of these Disney Plus series where it's not quite as costly for them.
Yeah, probably. It was just one of those things where I loved actually Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was a great movie. And then
supposedly we're getting a TV show based on Cassian Andor.
Oh, okay. Is that confirmed?
Yeah, like he's filmed it, I think, or is filming it or something. So nice. Yeah, it'll be a prequel series, obviously, since he dies in the movie.
Everyone dies. Yeah, exactly.
But even alert. Felicity Jones said like she would love to do something else as her character, but it would have to be a prequel, obviously. And that's what I hate about this is like we don't need a million prequels. No. I don't want more prequels. So like the Cassian Andor thing, I don't even understand why they did that, because it's like, was he a standout character in that movie? Like, not really.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Saw Gerrera, like his character was in Clone Wars and Rebels a little bit, so I understand why they used him in that movie. But yeah, I don't know what their plan is for his show. If it'll like, maybe it'll just be a one season thing that takes place right before that movie, because if they wait too long, he's gonna look older than he did in the movie.
Yeah, and then it just, I don't know, it just becomes more irrelevant the more time that they until they get to it. So yeah, no, that makes sense. And it seems like they have a lot of plans in place. They just haven't announced much of it yet, just because it's such a moneymaker, the whole Star Wars thing, and the Mandalorian has kind of filled that void for now, coming off the movies. But yeah, it just kind of felt weird to me, just because I know they have the Mandalorian now on Disney Plus, something they didn't have 5 years ago. But they were coming out with a Star Wars movie every fucking year there for like 4 or 5 years. And I know they did that, years ago and stuff. But the original trilogies, they were coming out with movies like every 3 years. And in recent years, they've come out with a movie every year. And I know Marvel has like 3 movies a year, but to me, it's just different for some reason. And it doesn't help the movies just aren't as good as some of the Marvel movies. So it's not as, when you have too much of a not a great thing, it just makes it even worse. And I loved Rogue One. I just thought some of the later Star Wars movies that weren't as good as they could have been. Although some of them are, I think, completely over-exaggerated in terms of hate that they get. I saw that you tweet about that actually earlier today or yesterday about The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, that movie isn't perfect by any means, and there's plenty of things about it that I don't like, but it has some really good action scenes. Some of the characters are really enjoyable, and there's a few characters in that I could see them spinning off or bringing into something else. So, like, what we're seeing in The Mandalorian is obviously taking place 25, 26, whatever years before those movies, but they could do a TV show about something else that takes place right after those movies, and then we get to see some of those characters. Like, what's her name, Kelly Marie Tran? I think she recently said like she wouldn't mind playing Rose again, even though it obviously got her bullied off Instagram and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sad what happened with her, but like, her character was sort of pushed to the background in that third movie, and I think that was intentional because the studio was like, well, a lot of people didn't like her so much, so blah blah blah. But like, there's still more they could do with her character.
No, definitely. It felt weird. I know why they did it, just because, not only the hate thing, but largely because it was just a different director. But she was a big part of that 8th movie, of episode 8. And love her or hate her, I mean, you should probably cap off her story a little bit better than they did with the 9th movie. It just felt inconsistent. I mean, a lot of things felt inconsistent from one movie to the next. But, yeah, no, I assume they'll probably do something with her at some point. I don't know her name, but the woman that was with Lando at the end of episode 9, that they kind of made it sound like she was like his daughter or something, but I don't think she is. They made it sound like they were related. You know who I'm talking about? That character that was friendly with Poe?
I don't remember her name either, and that just goes to show you how underdeveloped the character was.
Yeah.
I think Lando even said in an interview, like, yeah, she's supposed to be my daughter.
But they didn't make it clear, though, because if you watch that scene, you can get one of two things. You can interpret it as, okay, that's his daughter, or like there's a romantic relationship going. I know there's like a big age difference, but you could interpret it that if that was what they were going for. It was a very weird thing where they kind of left it ambiguous.
I don't know. Maybe they had thought like, oh, well, maybe we'll do another trilogy right after this one, and some of these characters will carry over, and then those plans changed. I don't know, but yeah, there were quite a few characters in this newer trilogy that they just felt wedged in. Like I kind of expected Captain Phasma to come back all like burned and injured in the third movie after it happened to her in the second movie, but no.
And then what's his name? Oh God, the collector's character.
Oh, Benicio Del Toro. Yeah, his character was just a one-off. Zori, the girl who never took her helmet off that Poe knew.
Oh, from the second movie, from episode 8.
From the third movie, she's got that golden helmet, and she's like a friend of his on that planet they go to.
I honestly don't remember. I don't remember that.
Carrie Russell who plays her. She's like, she never takes the helmet off, but she's in like a red bodysuit and this gold helmet, and she shows up in the big final battle. But yeah, when they need to get the information out of C-3PO's head, like they go to her for it because she knows somebody who can do it.
Well, maybe they'll use her again too. I don't remember that.
There's a bunch of characters that they didn't need to develop a little bit and then leave undeveloped. Like the first trilogy did something smart, which was like it had a lot of characters with lines, but it didn't make those characters interesting. You only cared about the main characters. And it seems like the newer movies want every character to stand out a little bit, and then that leads people to being like, well, I want to know more about that character, and then if they don't deliver, it's disappointing.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully these shows would do a better job of that. kind of filling in the blanks from the movies and things that people are frustrated about from the movies. They kind of do a better job of explaining certain stuff in these shows, it seems like, than they do in the films. So we'll see. There's a lot of stuff I think to look forward to if they indeed go down different routes and to kind of tie up loose ends from the movies. I enjoyed Rise of Skywalker in a nutshell for what it was. Definitely a lot of issues. It was definitely a mess just with how inconsistent certain things were, specifically the end. But I enjoyed it for what it was, so I can definitely second you on that one. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up from the episode itself that I forgot to mention for Mandalorian. Was it just me, or did the first scene of the episode of the Baby Yoda trying to put the wires back in place, that reminded me of the exact scene from Guardians 2 with Groot and Rocket. With Baby
yeah.
Groot. You know what I'm talking about?
You talking about with the bomb?
Yeah, with the bomb, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. That scene to me was like, they felt like the episode needed something funny, so they're like, let's just do that. And it was funny. But one thing I noticed is that, like, they're really giving that baby a lot more animation and emotion this year. Like, whatever they did with the puppet, they made some big improvements because you hear more noises, you see more facial expression. Like, the baby is growing, I guess.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, no, it's true. There's definitely more development there than there was in the first season.
50 years.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. I think they've done a good job of kind of developing that character with what he can do in facial expressions and whatever, and kind of communicating with Mando. So yeah, he's kind of been a background player, which is a good thing. I didn't want it to be all about Baby Yoda this season. Not that the first season was, but they're doing a good enough job of featuring him, but not overexposing him, which I think again has been a perfect component of season 2 so far. So, any additional thoughts on this episode, or any Star Wars related thoughts, Chris, before we wind down here?
I was going to ask if you'd seen the Lego Star Wars Christmas special they made.
I have not. So I forgot to ask you about that because I have not yet seen it. I'm going to be seeing.
On Disney Plus.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. I know that it came out on Tuesday. It came out the 17th on Life Day or whatever. I was waiting to watch it because I'm going to be seeing my brother in a couple of days, and we love like the Lego Star Wars stuff. I think we talked about this on the last episode or a couple of episodes ago. I love the Lego Star Wars shit. They're coming out with a new game next year. I'm not a big gamer at all, but I'm absolutely going to get that. That stuff is so much fun. So I'm waiting to watch it with him. I did see your tweet on it, though. You said it was all right and kind of what you would expected, but not like must-see by any means. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it wasn't as meta and over-the-top funny as, like, the Lego movie or the Lego Batman movie, but it was tongue-in-cheek, poking fun at Star Wars while also paying homage to it. But it's only 44 minutes, so it's a quick watch. And I think the funniest thing about it is, like, 2 or 3 of the characters you can tell are the real people doing the voices.
Oh, really?
And then there's a couple of them where they're like, wow, whoever that voice actor is doing a really good impression. And then the rest of them sound nothing like the actor. Like, the guys doing Poe and Finn sound nothing like Poe and Finn.
Oh, that's funny.
But, like, the girl who does Rey has her accent down pretty well, and then, like, I think it's actually Lando. Like,
oh, that's cool.
So but it's funny. There's a little reference to the Mandalorian in it, but, like, it's a 5-second scene, and I think the whole scene was in the trailer.
Oh, and as a reference to the Mandalorian?
Well, yeah, because the whole storyline is about time travel.
Oh,
so, like,
okay.
Rey keeps traveling through time and interacts with all these different scenes from all of the movies.
Oh, that's cool.
And they just pop into the Mandalorian for like 5 seconds, and yeah, like the whole thing is literally in the trailer. So, but you just hear that little like music cue from the Mandalorian's theme song, and you immediately know, like, oh, so now we're in the Mandalorian's timeline. Like, this is cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to checking it out. Do you know why they would have some of the original actors reprise their roles as with the voices and whatnot, but not the others?
I'm sure it came down to like whose prices were low and whose were high, and then also just who was available and willing.
True.
Because I mean, there are some people who probably get advised by their management, like, oh, don't take this role. Like, this isn't going to help your career. And then there's some people like Billy D. Williams where they're just like, yeah, man, I'll voice Lando, sure. Like, so,
Yeah.
it is what it is. And you see that a lot with animated adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually can't even think of any superhero actor who's voiced their cartoon counterpart other than Adam West. Because Adam West did a couple episodes of like Batman cartoons here and there
Mm-hmm.
as his version, but yeah, like I've Robert Downey Jr. has never done the voice of Iron Man in any of the Lego stuff or the other cartoons. Like
Mm.
Chris Evans has never done Captain America, and it's like maybe it's because their prices would just be too high. Maybe it's because they just don't want to do it, or maybe it's because the studio's like, we don't need their name recognition to sell this.
Maybe. I mean, you make a good point there. The only thing I would say is that one person that would seem to me that would be a perfect fit for someone that would actually do that would do the voice for their own character would be Mark Hamill. Now I know I'm mixing that up with like Joker related stuff and whatever, and he's done plenty of other voices. But like he was on an episode of that show. I don't know if you remember. This is like 15 years ago. That show Danny Phantom. I think it was on like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or something. He was in a show like that, but he wouldn't do like an animated Star Wars thing. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like he would be the perfect person to do that.
Yeah, I could totally see him being down to do that. He might have done the voice. I'm looking it up right now because
He was in Mandalorian too. I don't know if it was this season. It was definitely a past episode where he obviously not as himself, but like it was some random extra, and he did the voice for like a bartender or something. So like I don't if you would do that, I don't know why he wouldn't be willing to do the voice for one of his characters in an animated show. I mean, I guess he hasn't been in a lot of animated shows, or maybe even the video game. I don't know, something like that.
all right. So it looks like Kelly Marie Tran did do the voice of Rose in that,
Oh, okay.
and Billy D. Williams did do Lando, but like everybody else is a voice act. Oh, C-3PO is the guy, Anthony Daniels. He
Oh,
did
that's
do the
cool.
voice of C-3PO, but everybody else is just either voice actors that I've seen from other things, like D. Bradley Baker,
Mm-hmm.
or just somebody I've never heard of. Like the person who did the voice for Han Solo is somebody named AJ Lacasio. Like I have no idea who that is.
Yeah.
So it looks like he just does a bunch of voice work. It looks like he's been in a bunch of cartoons. So, you know, Disney has probably like a roster of voice actors that they work with on all their cartoon stuff that
True.
that they'll give projects to if they're loyal, or they do auditions for this stuff. So, like the woman who did Maz Kanata's voice was not Lupita Nyong'o who did it in the movies, but she sounded very close to it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those weird voices, which Maz Kanata, that's not Lupita Nyong'o's voice either. She's inflecting.
Yeah.
So that's why they're easy to impersonate, whereas somebody's real voice is much harder to impersonate.
Oh, 100%, yeah. No, that makes sense. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out. I'll give you my 2 cents. I'll probably watch it in the next couple of days. So, I'll do my brief review of it in the next couple of days, or on the next episode, rather, when we talk episode 5 of season 2, chapter, I think that's going to be chapter 13, coming up on Friday. And the season has been great so far. It's been great breaking it down. The Siege was fantastic, so people should go check it out, Disney Plus. And we got episode 5 coming up, I think, on Black Friday. I don't think they're taking a week off this week, despite the holiday coming up on Thursday. So that is pretty cool. But thanks as always, Chris. This has been awesome. I'll catch you next week. Enjoy the holiday if I don't talk to you before then.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. You too.